The kidnapping and execution of 12 Nepalese workers in Iraq in 2004 shocked the world. It also put the spotlight on the exploitation of foreigners brought to Iraq as part of the multi-billion-dollar reconstruction program. The United States says it's committed to fighting third world poverty, but that's a promise some see as forgotten in the nightmare of Iraq.
Unfortunately, the values of the United States have become so discarded in this war because of the rush, because of the mismanagement, because of the lack of pre-planning. They just threw Halliburton on the ground and said, hire people. We need this built. We need this built. We need this built. And Halliburton was just hiring the first person to walk up the street.
An average person off the street could end up in Iraq doing anything from security to medical care to construction. But nothing has been as big nor as lucrative as the Iraq project.
This is part of a grand plan that was put into full swing in the early 1990s when Dick Cheney was the defense secretary under George H.W. Bush. Every year of that administration, they cut back on the military. And it wasn't because they were anti-military. They wanted to enact a very radical privatization agenda.
Billions of dollars are being spent, and tens of thousands of workers have moved into the country. One of the biggest projects is the new American embassy in Baghdad, with a total projected cost $600 million. And some observers claim questionable labor practices have been used in the embassy's construction.
I read a story where there was a smuggling operation going on, bringing workers into the embassy project, which will be the largest embassy in the world, the size of Vatican City. Several workers told me they would get on planes, be handed Dubai boarding passes, and land in Baghdad with a plane load of workers from Nepal, from India, from the Philippines, Sri Lanka. Some people said they weren't sure the workers knew where they were going. Others said they did.
Some of Finney's information came from this man, Rory Maybury. A former US Army paramedic, he later worked for Halliburton. He flew into Baghdad in March 2006. Of all the workers on board, he was the only American. He witnessed firsthand the laborers' confusion and fear.
Once you get into Baghdad, you're like a herd of cow. You follow the first person that's going to tell you what to do because you think that person knows what to do to keep you safe. Everybody knows the dangers of Baghdad.
Pokhara, the gateway to the Himalayas, the so-called rooftop of the world, is about an hour from Kathmandu. This is prime recruiting ground for the labor middlemen. The long chain of contractors, subcontractors, middlemen and brokers all stand to profit from what is an extremely lucrative business, one that involves billions of dollars. The money chain begins here in Nepal and passes first through India, then the Gulf region, and finally into Iraq. Like thousands of others, Kush Bahadur was hired by agents in Nepal.
He promised us jobs with attractive salaries. We used a company which we were told was in Mumbai. When we got there, there was no trace of the company. We were only being shunted forward and sold along the line from one agent to another.
But Bahadur decided to return home and realized he had a lucky escape.
The day I was at the airport, there was talk that laborers were going to work at an American base there. And the conversation centered on salaries ranging between $500 and $1,000.
It's illegal for Nepalese citizens to work in Iraq. So on his return, Bahadur and his family reported the agent to the police. But he says they did nothing. Journalists, however, picked up the story. We wanted to find out more about the shady world of labor contracting in Nepal. So we have concealed the identities of these two men who agreed to help us. They arranged a meeting with a broker in a modest hotel room. Our hidden cameras were ready to record the conversations that took place.
We've heard that you have a good reputation.
I can send anybody to any country, but it's a risk without legal procedures. With regard to Iraq and Afghanistan, people go there to work as guards and security personnel because it pays very well. A lot of people send workers to Iraq. I've been doing it for quite a while.
Even though this broker knew it was illegal to take workers to Iraq, he found a way to get around the law.
We're going to take you to India, Kuwait, then Iraq. At every stopover you'll get a visa. But be careful, don't mention to anyone that you paid money for this. My share is $300 for every person.
The major need in Iraq continues to be medical care, and qualified doctors are helping the middlemen recruit.
There's a group of Nepali doctors which arranges for nurses to be sent to Iraq. These doctors have a medical research unit here in Nepal. In Iraq, a war is raging. They need nurses at an American base, surrounded by Nepali guards. With regard to visas, well, the doctors have their own ways of getting them. Once you've been approved and you get the job, then you pay the doctors here in Nepal.
But hiring standards are lax, and there are some suggestions that some medical workers are unqualified.
I asked several of the nursing staff, you know, do you know what this medication is? Do you know what this is? Do you know what this is? And none of them knew what it was. Well, my question there to the State Department project manager was, how can they be giving this medication to anybody if they don't know what it is?
And according to some observers, it's not only in the field of medicine that ill-qualified workers have been hired.
They referred to these contractors that would provide the laborers as body shops. Basically, just bring me warm bodies. We're putting them on the battlefield. These are just stories people have told me. I can't say that every contractor is this way, but I've heard it repeatedly.
And there's concern as well about the treatment laborers get.
They were given food in barrels, sometimes cardboard boxes with a plastic garbage bag, and then throw in rice and chicken or fish heads or whatever, cook it up, and that's what they'd eat twice a day. Sometimes they didn't have enough water.
They spend as little money as possible on both food and security and lodging, and if people complain about it, well, see ya. So this all leads to abuses, and there's many more stories, of course, of individual abuse, but overall there's a pattern of getting the cheapest possible labor, spending the least amount of money, and if you don't like it, tough. You know, it's my way or the highway. And these people are stuck in Iraq. It's not like they're in Idaho where they can just get on a bus and go home. They're stuck in probably the world's most dangerous place, without money to get home, without tickets, without even sometimes passports or visas.
Not all of this has gone without notice in Washington. Questions have been raised, particularly in relation to the huge US embassy project in Baghdad. Those questions led to a fact-finding tour by the Inspector General of the State Department. But the conclusion suggested no cause for concern. Workers, said the study, were not being mistreated. Hiring practices were fair, and there was a complete rejection of concerns that cheap imported labor was costing Iraqi workers jobs in their own country.
The contractors in Iraq provide some very valuable services that the Iraqi people aren't able to do yet. They drive logistics trucks, they drive water trucks, they help build bridges, they help build roads, they help build schools. There's a lot of contractors that are helping rebuild the economic infrastructure of the country of Iraq right now. So they're providing a very valuable service until we can get Iraqis back doing those jobs again.
But critics disagree.
Once again, it begs the question, I mean, with unemployment running 30 to 80% in Iraq, why aren't Iraqis benefiting from these huge, massive, multi-billion-dollar contracts?
No big contracts! No big contracts! No big contracts! Corporate welfare! Corporate!
We are ashamed of Halliburton. We say tear up the contracts with Halliburton, give the money to Iraqis to rebuild their own country, and get Dick Cheney and George Bush out of the White House.
The Iraq occupation is made possible through the use of human trafficking. We know that there are workers from poor countries around the world that have been recruited to work in Iraq for a series of multinational corporations or powerful U.S. companies. So, I mean, human trafficking is what makes the occupation of Iraq tenable for the U.S. You have a failure to actually work with official nation states, and so you just go in and you recruit their individual citizens, taking advantage of their economic depravity.
The United States says it's committed to fighting third world poverty, but that's a promise some see as forgotten in the nightmare of Iraq.